Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. As you can probably tell from my background, I am not at home. I do not live in a faceless hotel room, um, at least not yet. So it's very, very nice to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. This is a really exciting one for us because it's been a few years in the making. The purpose of the session is to take you through kind of the work that we've done to codify our first impact report for 2025. And really, we wanted to be very clear that what we're actually codifying is the impact of the burnt islanders. So the 31 companies, we've made 34 investments. We're working on behalf of 31. The 31 investments who we're very, very proud to be a member of the cap table. So this is going to be a split session between me and our fantastic senior associate, Marissa Sterling. I'm just going to take you through a bit of a preamble, and then we'll dive into the data and the structure of how we thought about the way in which Burnt Island effectuates its impact on the water world. So just quickly, structurally, just first off, just a massive welcome to everybody, and we'll give you a bit of an overview of where we are. And then Marissa's going to dive into the theory of change, the impact metrics, and then we have some portfolio presentations, which are going to be really excellent. And then there's going to be plenty of time for next steps and Q&A. Please do be active. We will keep an eye on the chat. If you do have if you do have any questions, dive in there, and we'll sort of either do them in real time or save them to the end, or whatever it might be. We play a little bit of jazz. It won't be any kind of reflection on the quality of the question, I must say. Sometimes we do them in line. Sometimes we wait for the end, but all questions are excellent. So definitely put any queries or clarifications or anything you want us to go deeper on in through the chat or directly to us in messages, whatever you feel. Okay. So first off, I want to start with really just a reminder of what we're doing at BIV, and it has the advantage of being very simple. So we as a group, we are finding, funding, and supporting the best water entrepreneurs in the world. We have a couple of them here today, but this is what the group looks like now. On the next slide, we have just a list of all of the people that we've been privileged enough to back. And I think what I want you to take and what you're going to see in terms of the kind of the impact depth is that as we get to this critical mass of over now 30 live companies, is that we really have very wide range of impact. Water's one of the beauties of operating within water is that it touches everything that we will see in just a second. So if you're going everywhere from the new horizons of LED based UV treatment to permanent carbon removal from the wastewater process to totally new generation of robotic irrigation to innovations in membranes, industrial water, real-time sensing, subsurface desalination. What we feel we have kind of become is an instrument for very wide-ranging, multivariate impact on the water sector through backing these absolutely unbelievable teams that are building the companies that can really build the process of deleting their chosen pain point within water. So if we go to the next slide. The reason this is important is very easily summarized within this chart. So the Global Water Intelligence, which is our sort of main trade paper, called this the scariest chart they've ever published. And I really don't like being dramatic, but this is quite a dramatic one. So as you see the orange going through to red, what that is essentially the temperature above the pre-industrial mean. That is the world getting hotter. And the dark gray bars that you see there are the proxy for the intensity of droughts and floods. So these are incidences of increasing groundwater amounts. So that happens when there are sort of excess inundation events, so floods, or excess drying events. So the reduction in groundwater as measured by the gravity of it from space by NASA. So this essentially tells you the variability of what's happening on the ground in terms of inundation or drying events, droughts and floods, more than one standard deviation from the mean. And if you project this figure backwards, but to way before 2003, you just see a repeating pattern. What we always had was some degree of variability, but it was predictable, so you could live within it. And what happened in 2019 is that we rolled a hand grenade under the stasis that we've relied upon as humans in order for everything from where we live, where we work, what we grow, what we produce, where we produce it. And so what we're living in is a world that is about three times outside the means of any experiment that we've ever run before in terms of dealing with the excesses of water, because we really have predicated everything we do on this stasis, and it is now broken. So the question then becomes, of course, what are we going to do about it? So if we move on to the next slide. This shows up in images that are becoming all too all too familiar. One of the things that we have been heartened by actually is that the presence of water in the media. There is a better story being told in the very in on the global media side of things. But the problem is, of course, is that the reason that's being told is that there are more stories to tell. Downstream of the chart that you just saw is this. And then on the other side, on the next slide, is the polar opposite. It's the drying of the world again, everywhere from really across the world. What you're seeing almost in tandem, and anybody who's been following the stories coming out of Australia, you really can move on a dime from being in the grips of a very, very serious drought to suddenly being in a flooding event. So too little water, too irregularly is the other side of the coin, and really the two often go hand in hand. If we go to the next slide. And so, just to take it back to domestically within the US, these effects feed back on themselves. So, without climate change, of course, there was going to be, an increase in water withdrawals. Whether that's centers of population or it's at centers of agricultural activity, whatever it might have been. But with climate change, it just exacerbates these effects, right? As the world gets hotter, you need to abstract more water from surface and groundwater assets. And so everything just accelerates. And so you're looking at a baseline of changes in water withdrawals out to 2065. Really, if you look at the right-hand element there, in many places, well above 50%. And as a kind of a normal in the middle of the country, something like 35 to 40%. And if you were to overlay the groundwater assets that you have, what you have is stress on increasingly unavailable groundwater assets. And so if you go to the next slide. In the context of water disappearing, the infrastructure with which we manipulate water in order to get it not only into the hands of people and to get the water that has been used out of the hands of people, but also keeping us safe. If you look at the levy grade here, just imagine if your child brought home this report card, or if you do not have a child, imagine when you were in school and you brought home this report card. I think your parents would be likely very upset. One of the things that really annoys me about this slide is the overall GPA is a C. When you just eyeball this, it's worse than a C. But really, when you dig into the water side of things, especially, I mean, we're really knocking it out of the park with a C minus with drinking water. What has happened in the US is that the infrastructure has aged out, and it might seem like hyperbole, but it actually isn't. Centralized funding for or federal and frankly state funding fell out of bed at the end of the 70s and has not yet and has never recovered. There's been an uptick since 2020. There was a graph that we usually show, but I don't have it. I'm not showing it here. But the job essentially, there was a 40-year gap in funding. And when you build infrastructure assets, you build them for a 40-year useful life. We are now 6 years beyond the end of that 40-year gap between 1980 and 2020. Really, what the job that's in front of the US is to physically replace its water, wastewater, stormwater levy assets, not to mention the dams, which are also in a parlor state. There is a very serious amount of work to do. So if we move on to the next slide. And so what we face when you zoom out is really inexorable, substantial global water risk. And you can see this as the really tricky thing here is the overlap between populations and water risk. Obviously interrelated because of the stress that populations put on water resources. But if you just look at around India and Pakistan and the subcontinent, and then obviously across China into Eastern Europe, and then Southern Europe, and then it's always the stresses that are going to be happening on the African continent, which demographically is going to be the engine of progress for the decades to come. One of the principal issues that the entire continent is going to be facing is to become the hub that it inevitably will be, but in the face of radical limitations on water. And we think it's as a result, it's one of the most important areas for impact. Um, and so taking us to the next slide, what does not getting this right looks like? I mean, this is all, all things that have happened really in the last 12 months, and in a couple of cases, really, you're just looking in the last 2 months. So Corpus Christi, anybody who's been following that in the top left, an inability to build desalination capacity has led them to essentially approach a day zero situation in a very serious engine of growth for Texas, a serious center of population for Texas. The heat domes that are being experienced is very, very serious. And anybody who's been following the Colorado River issues, this is going to be a major story in 2026 as we figure out exactly how the Colorado management plan is going to be. Obviously, the tragic floods in Texas, in the top right there, that is one of the principal reservoirs serving Tehran in Iran. This was one of the progenitors of the unrest that we saw at the end of last year as financial crises come into contact with an inability to access fresh water. Across the bottom, we have Greece, we have mains explosions in Atlanta, we have Afghanistan, and then we have the rubble of a section of a desalination plant in Bahrain. Which, if you take us to the next slide, and we really do mean it, if you don't solve water, nothing matters. But I really wish that I would never have to show this slide. Historically, water has actually been much more of a source of cooperation than it has been a source of conflict. But this is from the UN's recent water bankruptcy report. This is based on some really important data and tracking that the Pacific Institute does. And mercifully, the gross numbers are still relatively small relative to where we would be. But the pattern of movement is not ideal. This is the number of water conflicts as measured by the researchers at the Pacific Institute and propagated by the UN. Um, Water is increasingly something that people are getting into conflict over. Again, we are not in the Mad Max era, and our job at BIV is to invest in the technologies to make sure that not only is water stay cheap and available, it just does not become a source of conflict. That people are always going to fight about something, but we really don't want water to be a part of it because it's something that we do inherently respect. A great example is the Indus Valley Treaty between India and Pakistan, which, since it was signed in 1960, the first violation of it really only happened last year, which, given the history between those two nations, it is really heartening. But that we did have the first violations. It's not a good precedent. And hopefully with this, when we check back in on this graphic in the coming years, that we will see a flattening and a reduction. But unfortunately, Marissa, if you just compare us to the next slide. You have to be very careful about correlation versus causation. But if you look at the shape of both of these curves, it is at best very striking that as the variability of water goes up, the incidences of people fighting over it are also going up. So Marissa, if you take us to the next slide. So we're really building the firm that needs to exist in this context. There are lots of things that need to be done, from financing to policy, etc. But we really need to have an engine that is financing on a reasonably large scale the experiments that will allow us to maintain our resilience in the face of the water future that we've sort of baked in for ourselves. And it's coming and it's going to be very difficult. But technology can really help. And this sector is enormous, $1.6 trillion a year in capex and opex, growing at 5 to 8%. So compounding into something much, much larger. It is, of course, underinvested. We have an era of renewal here in Western countries, and then in non-OECD or non-OECD countries, what you have essentially is wide-scale infrastructure being built essentially for the first time. So you have dual tracks of investment that make this commercially inevitable. And as this becomes commercially inevitable, what you have is the opportunity for massive impact for entrepreneurs within the sector. Now, the key part of if you're going to be a fund like ourselves is that you have to have the raw ingredients. You have to, sorry, just to go back one. You have to have the raw ingredients, the high quality entrepreneurs now, and they're now advancing to the growth stage, which is why that we've put our growth fund in business. We think we've done a good job of becoming the standout VC for water. Yesterday we crossed 100 million in AUM, which is just a means to an end. It's great. It is obviously a helpful milestone for us. But we've invested in 34 companies. Only one company has gone out of business. And we are very, very proud of the companies that we've supported. And the progress is strong. Marissa, if we go to the next slide. This only matters if these companies become commercial. They have to be, in order to manifest the impact that is inherent, or that is inherent within their activities, they have to get to financial scale and also financial sustainability. And that's really what we're seeing. We are, we're well within to the top quartiles and for Fund Two, and certainly in terms of our MOIC in Fund One, well into the top decile for our various vintage. So we're competitive with any other provider of early stage capital out there. And as I say, what we love is the breadth of impact that is being supported by the breadth of commercial achievement. And it really is very exciting to see where the numbers that you're about to see are going to go next year and in the following year. So that is more than enough from me, but I hope that that sets the context for you. And it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Marissa Sterling, who's going to take you through what this looks like on an impact basis.
Amazing. Thank you, Tom. Building out a model for impact for a water fund comes with its distinctive challenges. Unlike our friends at the more generalist climate funds, who are measuring their returns in relation to emissions reductions or decarbonization, in water, there is no single metric. The challenge, as Tom just explained, is that too much water can be a problem, as can too little. On the flip side, producing water is sometimes really important, and reducing it can be equally helpful. A lot of these metrics have to be contextualized. We spent a lot of time thinking about the reality that water needs to be in the right quantity, quality, price, place, and time. To figure out what it looks like when everything goes right in water, we landed on 4 primary impact areas. In other words, what Tom showed you, when things go wrong, if we do our job right, what does everything look like? The first is access, meaning that water is not only physically accessible, but also at the right price and quality. Secondly, we landed on treatment and reuse, which is the idea that we need to be reusing every single molecule of water over and over and over again. We need technologies and services that enable us to be able to do that in the right places and at the right quantities. Third is efficiency and safety, and this one gets really interesting because not only do we see in this area that we are reducing waste, crucially, we're enabling safer jobs and jobs that people actually want to do and are better equipped to do them. It's also an interesting area because it's here where we can bring costs down to be able to make water as cheap as possible so that it's in turn more accessible. The last one is a little bit of a larger umbrella, but we thought it was important because we needed to track down this idea of the water energy nexus in climate mitigation and disaster avoidance, think catastrophic flood events, in climate adaptation, which is why we chose climate mitigation and adaptation as our fourth impact area. So now we have our 4 goals, which you can see brilliantly highlighted in yellow on the right-hand side. The trick now is, how do we get to this yellow brick road? As a VC, our job is to put capital, time, and network, the 3 inputs that we have at our disposal, to invest in the best water companies globally. But to do that, we need to find the best companies, build and construct our portfolio that reflects the best interests of our LPs, develop a brand that can help our companies enter the market and bring in a network of co-investors and LPs into that space to support them, and lastly, help those companies actually do the hard work that is company building. So assuming we do an absolutely fantastic job, as you all know we do, what do those outputs look like? What we're tracking here is what companies actually do as a result of us investing capital and time into helping them grow. This is where it starts to get really fun, at least I think so, because we don't have to look at numbers of subscribers or credits of AI that are on a platform. As a water-focused fund, we're already starting to see these things resemble impact pretty soon. Because the nature of water is that it is a physical, tangible, aqueous liquid. Many of the companies track their own impact metrics as part of their business model. Irrigreen, for example, is a next-gen sprinkler head that basically prints water to grass. It is insanely cool, and they save 50% of water compared to a regular sprinkler system just by operating. They measure the amount of water they save so that they can report that to their customers, both as an impact metric and as a financial one, to show the potential costs they can reduce for their customers. Enline Energy turns wasted steam into energy through microsystem turbine systems that are actively tracking how they turn water into energy. We'll dive more into these outputs in a little bit, but from here you can see that the next step for us, and admittedly we're not here yet, is to derive what are the outcomes as a result of the outputs. Things like, have we increased access to safe, clean drinking water? Is water use more efficient? Have we reduced the impact of natural disasters on global GDP? And that's how we map those outcomes eventually to the impact itself. Ambitious, but what's really fun is to see how far the companies are and how tangible it really gets. So, mapping out to these 4 categories of impacts was actually one of the biggest challenges, because so many of the companies fit into 2 or more, if not all, of the categories. What we wanted to be able to do is to pinpoint, okay, this is the metric that stands out more than any of the others, that this company should be having a real impact in. And I think this is interesting to see kind of where they map out. There's a clear concentration of companies in efficiency and safety. And I think that's because there's just so much to be done around the people working in the space and how much we can use technology and now AI to help them do their jobs better and in a safer way. And also giving them the tools to be able to transfer that knowledge from one generation to the next. Then on the flip side, access, which has the fewest companies, actually shows some of the biggest numbers, because when we're able to increase access, those companies are able to increase access to water in large quantities and to large numbers of people. So let's jump into the numbers. Okay, so this is a snapshot of just a few of the metrics that we got from companies. And while we have a few metrics that overlap, such as water produced and water processed, we found that the vast majority of companies really did have a unique metric that had its own impact that was worth pulling out individual. We worked with every company on an individual basis to basically cross-compare their business model and what they're already measuring with the SDGs and the IRIS Plus to define one metric that they would track and report on. And the results, we think, have been fairly impressive, if we say so ourselves, of what's going on in water and the amount of impact that the BIV companies can have. For example, Sewer AI, 12 million inspections that a human no longer needed to sit there and watch a video feed going down a sewer system to figure out if there was a problem. Instead, those same people were able to have AI do the boring work, and they were able to look at the tricky situations and actually spend their time working on solving the desperately needed problems. Algafilm, which in their early days treated 144,000 gallons of water. They're a fun one to work with because not only do they measure the gallons of water processed, they also measure how much phosphorus was removed, how much nitrogen was removed, how much CO2 was sequestered. We start to see like this larger picture of what it actually means to treat water. You'll hear from two of our outstanding companies, Flotion and Hope Hydration, more about how they measure this impact and what this looks like. I just wanted to give you a sense of the breadth of impact that water has. But we don't only track what the companies do, we also track how much we support the companies to get there. And we get really nitty-gritty about this because we think about the activities that we do to put our capital, time, and network to work. To the point that before we even started tracking metrics from the companies, we started tracking our own activities first. When we onboard a new company, we show them our scorecard. It's basically a report card that we produce for every company once a quarter to view as a team how that company is doing, and more importantly, how we can support them. We grade it not just on how the company's doing, but on how we are doing support them. All of that is aggregated into our database to show which companies we're supporting, what types of activities, who's doing what, and where we can get better. Because our view is that the more we do to put our inputs to work, the more our companies can grow and the greater the outputs, outcomes, and ultimate impact can be. For us, that resulted in over almost 1,000 activities in 2025 across the team. That's probably a conservative number because we're not always great at tracking. We're getting there. But it's allowed us to aggregate this pool of data on where companies struggle and how we can help them avoid those pitfalls over and over again. To the point that we host an annual founder forum every year where we bring together all of our founders to learn from each other over a 2-day period. And that agenda this year was basically built off of the data that we aggregated of where were the fires that happened this year so we can avoid those and grow faster and leap over the things that we as a BIV community have already learned. But why hear it from us? We thought it would be even better if you could hear it from some of the founders directly about how they've built impact into their business models, what impact means for them, and how they go about it. So our first speaker I'd like to introduce is Jorge Richardson, who is the fantastic founder and CEO of Hope Hydration. Hope, as you'll hear about, is a water fountain company that has turned their revenue ads into an ability to provide access to water to people all over the world. They are super fun to watch. And Jorge, I will let you take it away.
Thank you very much. Good to see some faces. Good to meet everybody else. Let me just share my screen here. As Marissa mentioned, can you all see my slides here? Great.
Perfect.
As Marissa mentioned, I'm Jorge Richardson. I'm the founder CEO of Hope Hydration. I'm going to spend about 60 seconds outlining who Hope Hydration is in case you don't know. And then I want to talk about how we think about impact, which is actually twofold. We have internal and we have external impact. And really like at the kind of root cause of or that the root of impact for us is data. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then my email's around if you have follow-up questions. But very, very quick high-level overview. Hope Hydration is a technology company that's increasing access to free drinking water. Plain and simple, what we've done is really tried to redefine the drinking water fountain experience in 3 ways through a much better refined user experience. It's the product, through data capabilities, which we're going to spend a large amount of time talking about today, and through the third, which is our business model innovation. Take a step back. How did I get to Hope? Before I started Hope, I worked on an iPhone app that mapped every free water fountain in the world. About 12 months in, we get a call from a company called Apple. Apple says, this is really interesting. We'd like to take the data. And we eventually integrated that data on every 1.5 billion iPhones around the world. And I was like, I've done it. And then I realized I hadn't done anything at all. The months leading up to the integration, Apple had us manually verify in random cities that the infrastructure existed. And the learning was more often than not, the water fountains would be there, right? On the Upper West Side in New York City. There is a water fountain there, but it's either like 100 years old, it doesn't work, or I have to walk 45 minutes out of my way to like refill. Like that is not a system built for refills. And it really leads into the impact. The learnings when we first started Hope was like water fountain, infrastructure really hasn't been modernized in decades. I've picked two of the worst examples here. They're not all this bad, but this is kind of what it looks like. So again, we wanted to build a product that looked amazing, worked amazing, was data first, and had a brand new business model. And really, that's what we do. And so I've just got a couple of photos here. If you fly through Minneapolis, St. Paul, you'll see us there. We both service kind of venue side, but we also service events. So this was Coldplay last year. This was after the whole sc scandal, if you will. But if we do our job, we can make free water within a 5 minute walk everywhere on planet Earth. And that is like a very, very bold claim and a very grandiose vision. And it really starts with the data. Impact for me and for us is data. And we view, as I mentioned, we view both the data and the impact in kind of two directions, internal and external. And instead of kind of sharing slides, I'm actually going to give a live demo of our internal tool. I don't think I've ever shown anyone outside of the company the internal side. So it's I'm excited to see if our engineers kill me. But the internal side really is about business outcomes. So how can the data really drive internal impact? And the external is really how does the data drive and measure and prove external kind of all the external impact that we do. And so internally, and I will kind of stop here for a sec. Internally, when you think about a business like ours, there's a lot of impact that we could have, and if we're smart about it, we can avoid, right? We have to produce stations, we have to ship stations, we have to install stations, we have to maintain stations, and there's this whole network, right? And if we do it wrong, we've got an event lineup for the next 3 months, and we have one station going on one truck and another station going on another truck, and it's really disorganized. The business impact for us is it costs more, but the environmental impact is that we might have to send 15 trucks, and each truck has their own carbon emissions, and it's just a really kind of outdated system. And there was nothing on the market that really like fit what we needed, and so we said, okay, well, we'll just build something. This is our internal tool. It's called Varuna, and we call it the brain of everything we do. Every single thing that we have is plugged into Varuna, whether it's our CRM system, it's our install calendar, it's our manufacturing schedule. Everything is first plugged in here, and this is kind of our first source of impact. And I'll just give you kind of a live demo. This will snapshot everything, but you can go in here, you can see all the stations that we currently have online. You can see their uptime. So this is one of our stations in Los Angeles, and you can see all of the granular information about everything, the refills, the this is more kind of on an operational standpoint, and this really like helps us. If you have this level of granularity on a single station, and then you can take a step back, we can really start planning our routes more efficiently, planning our installs more efficiently, and really start measuring, not guessing, and not kind of theorizing what is the best route to do this for the business outcome. And that business outcome, when we streamline the truck schedule to be one truck, also is the environmental impact. So I know I don't have a lot of time, but I'll start with kind of Varuna and our internal tool. If we have time, I'll come back. Um, the core point of our internal impact is that if we can streamline our business outcome, it's going to be cheaper for us and it's going to be better for the planet. The internal impact, once you start getting really, really granular on how a station performs in real time, then we have a lot of external impact. And the most kind of external facing data points are going to be gallons dispensed, bottles avoided, gallons of water avoided, carbon CO2 equivalents avoided, but it gets much, much more granular because of the level of data that we have. And so I'll give you two examples. This is a dashboard of just one installation we have. And this is all real time, second by second data. So I'm looking at the refills per hour. This is Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. Refills per hour. And you can see during the daytime, it spikes overnight. And then you can go down and start getting even more granular. How many refills and bottles did we divert this month? What about the last 7 days? What are the refills per station, per location, right? And what this does is, of course, this is the end all number down here. total bottles diverted since install, kilograms of plastic diverted, gallons of water diverted, and grams of CO2 diverted. But this also drives our business outcomes as well, because then when you start layering on our impact data, if we do our best job, we're not just putting stations in places for no reason. We're putting stations in places where people want to refill, and this can inform it. And so even in this MSP case, MSP Main Mall South outperforms the arrivals 5-1. That's a business outcome that we can pull and say, okay, for the next airport, what can we do differently? That same station, the same amount of carbon to produce it and ship it and install it could have 5 times the environmental impact just because of the snapshot that we have here. If we can zoom that out over 100 airports, then the data gets really, really more powerful. This is our like kind of global. So Marissa had mentioned we were at 1.3. We are at 4.8 million refills lifetime to date, at least since we started tracking. And again, you have a really, really kind of global snapshot of what all of our stations are doing. And if you scroll all the way down, we can look at our kind of quarterly numbers on again, how many plastic bottles we're saving, how many gallons of water we've avoided, and what the carbon impact is. And so really, I'll kind of end here. This is I tried to crop any logos out, but this is the industry standard. It's really kind of analog number tracking, and people go around with a clipboard and they say, okay, well, this station has avoided 11,581 stations. That's 30 years ago. And what we want to say is not only can we provide at Hope a better experience for you to refill in better places, not only can we provide a business model that funds it entirely on its own, but we can provide an entire ecosystem that's cloud-based minute by minute. So no longer are we guessing or theorizing on what the impact is. We've got that data and we're actually using that to drive really, really tangible business outcomes, whether it's our shipping schedule, where we're installing, how we're installing, or what you all see at the end, which is how many single-use bottles have we saved? What is our water gallons of water saved, and what is our carbon savings? So that's a snapshot on Hope. I'm happy to jump on if there are questions.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Jorge. That was like absolutely fabulous. Not that I'm surprised in the least. Our next company is Flotion, which is a subsea desal company that is literally flipping the dynamics of desal. They've spent a lot of time thinking about impact to the point that they built their own impact report. So I'm thrilled to have Kendall Miller, who is their environmental manager, here to share how they went about it and their results. Kendall, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marissa, and thank you to Burnt Island Ventures for having me. Let me just pull up or share my screen and pull up my. Can you all hear me fine?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. All right. So here we are, Flotion. And I will just dive in. So before we dive into Flotion and the problem, I would like to just go, or dive into Flotion, I'd like to just go over the problem. So desalination is a critical solution to the water crisis and all the things that Tom showed that we don't want to see happen in our world. But it's wrought with issues such as intensive energy consumption, and there's vast room for improvement. Conventional desalination is associated with high energy consumption, toxic discharge of brine and chemicals, and extensive use of coastal land that's often scarce and expensive. Seeing these gaps in existing desalination technologies, coupled with our expertise in subsea pumping systems, Flotion was born. So what is Flotion? Flotion is a next-gen desalination utility that sells water as a service. Our core technology, Flotion Deep, operates 400 to 600 meters below the surface of the ocean. We leverage the natural hydrostatic pressure to cut energy consumption up to 50% versus conventional desal. We're pre-commercial with 5 full-time employees. We recently closed an over $22 million Series A, and we were named a Time Best Invention of 2025. 2 important notes. Flotion was stemmed off from FSubsea, our sister company. The companies still share offices and resources. So functionally, we're a team of 20, all based in Oslo, Norway. Another bit of more exciting news is that we are just weeks away from installing and having first water from the world's first subsea commercial desalination unit off the west coast of Norway in Mongstad. So I started at Flotion at the same time that the company was established in 2024. My background is in both corporate sustainability and marine science. My role at Flotion covers a number of areas such as ESG strategy, environmental compliance, marine surveys and EIAs, and impact reporting. It should also be noted that Flotion is an SFDR Article 9 investee company. SFDR stands for Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, and Article 9 is the highest sustainability classification in Europe. With this, we're required to submit ESG and impact reporting every year to some of our investors. With this, we also have to demonstrate a clear sustainability objective, do no significant harm, and maintain measurable ongoing impact reporting. And at Flotion, similar to Hope Hydration, we like to think of sustainability in two pillars. So we have corporate sustainability, or how the company runs itself. So this would be our offices or business travel. And then we have product sustainability, or how Flotion Deep performs in the field and how it interacts with the deep sea. For the rest of this presentation, I'm going to go through the results from our first year of operations and our first year of impact reporting. So for 2025, our carbon footprint totaled at 281 tons of CO2 equivalents. And these were all from Scope 3 value chain activities. So purchasing things like a 10-ton steel frame for our Flotion 1 pod. Our supply chain procurement was over 16 significant suppliers from 7 different countries for our Flotion 1 construction phase. We had 0 Scope 1 and 2 emissions, although we did purchase energy. It was just all here in Norway, where there is an emission factor of 0 and it's all renewable energy. We had no fossil fuel revenue. And in addition, we have 4 key best climate practices in place, including board level oversight and Paris-aligned targets for greenhouse gas emissions. For energy, water, and waste metrics, these reflect our pre-commercial status. So once again, we had 100% renewable energy, all purchased within Norway. We only had 12 cubic meters of water consumed for testing of our Flotion 1 pod in the workshop. And we had 0 hazardous waste, which is a direct result of our chemical-free desalination process, which is another major differentiator from conventional desalination. On the social side, we have 40% women in our workforce and management, though board level female representation is an area we've identified for improvement in the future in the coming years. The 25.8% unadjusted gender pay cap reflects the reality of a 5-person team, a small team, where seniority mix drives that number. With most of 2025 involving procurement, construction, and testing of our Flotion 1 pod, we had 0 workplace accidents, 0 quality health and safety incidents, and we had full governance framework in place, including human rights due diligence, whistleblower protections, and all necessary policies. And lastly, on top of the SFDR Article 9 reporting that we have to do, we also have a couple investors that are a part of 1,000 Ocean Startups and are specifically ocean impact investors who require us to report on the Ocean Impact Navigator framework. For most of these categories, as you can see, we are pre-operational since we haven't yet deployed any units into the field. The one active category is towards 1.5 degrees Celsius, where we've measured all scopes 1, 2, and 3 carbon equivalent emissions and established Paris-aligned targets. Many of these metrics and categories will activate in 2026 in the coming weeks when we have first water from Flotion 1. So looking ahead and how we're thinking about impact moving forward, our biggest milestone is going to be launching Flotion 1 at Mongstad. With this being the world's first commercial subsea desal plant, this launch really unlocks real operational data. So we'll be tracking metrics like freshwater production, energy efficiency, and marine environmental impact. We've already commissioned some ecological surveys, and we will begin tracking metrics that will tell the full Flotion impact story. This is a very exciting time, especially for me, because this is where impact moves from frameworks and hypotheses and reporting to real numbers. With that, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions at the end of this, or feel free to use the QR code to access our website and reach out there, or see my email on the slides. Thank you.
That was amazing, Kendall. Thank you. It's so fun to see like kind of the outputs of this. I'm going to share my screen.
And Kendall, your numbers are going to go way up now that 2026 numbers now that you're going to be having a working system. So these will change pretty
Exactly,
dramatically
exactly. We're just
in a very
pre-commercial,
positive
so
way. Yep.
exponential change, hopefully.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Kendall and Jorge. To bring this together, I think what we've learned through this entire impact process, is how cross-cutting the water sector is you just saw, two completely different companies, um, and how they show impact. And maybe that's not so surprising, right? Because of the number of sectors that our companies operate in. But to show you, when we started mapping out the companies just along the SDGs, it was really hard not to include all of them. Because when we start to highlight them, it's like, oh, this indicator matches exactly to this company. And we had so many of them, and it's pretty insane for only 34 companies. But before we move to Q&A, I just wanted to say a huge, huge thank you to many of our LPs who have served as mentors and also provided a ton of guidance in how to develop the first impact report for a water VC. We are so grateful that you've chosen to partner with us and to continue to support us along that journey. So thank you everyone for joining today. We're happy to answer any and all questions. I see a few of them in the chat already, but feel free to drop them in there. Or if you need to jump, we're always just an email away. So let me stop sharing. And looks like Jack, you had a question in there. I'm just going to go down the list. Do you anticipate the creation of your impact categories or the calculation of the impact metrics playing a part in future investment and portfolio construction decisions? Definitely. I think this is an evolving process. I think that's our next steps is both we look at the impact when we actually make an investment, but building that out even more, kind of what are the next steps of this, knowing kind of, what are the outputs that like Jorge and Kendall just showed you. What does that look like? How can we look for that at the earlier stage when we're actually making the investment? So definitely.
And just a comment on that, we just updated our due diligence report to map the theory of change framework that Marissa laid out. And then like on our growth fund, we did assign one of our IC advisors to specifically look at impact and ask those questions as part of the IC process. We don't have like yet any specific for portfolio construction. Here's what we're committing to achieve. We don't have that yet. It's more making sure that we're deliberately thinking about this through throughout the process, aligning with the CEOs of the companies on what metrics to report that map to that theory of change framework.
Yeah, totally. Kendall, there's one for you. These impact metrics are great to see, but seems like a big reporting ask for a pre-commercial company with a small team. Are there trade-offs or opportunity costs of your time to focus on measuring and communicating impact versus focusing on the product launch?
That is a great question. Thank you, Connor. I forgot to mention in my presentation, but we're functionally, yes, a team of 20. So we do have a lot more people. And I think I was brought on at the inception of Flotion to do a lot of this work. There are sometimes trade-offs, but I think that since we are management and we do see the value and we are selling a green product, we need to walk the walk and talk the talk. And so we really need to back these up. And if anyone here is familiar with like UN Global Compact or other reporting frameworks, it's not too different from some voluntary reporting frameworks. It's just a couple little edits to the metrics. So it's not actually too time consuming. And there's a lot of good software that can help you these days in these things. So I think we really just stand behind the claims that we're making, and we really want to back those up. So I think it's worth it for our team to go through all this. Yeah.
Oh, no, awesome. Maybe the next one. What patterns have you seen in BIV portfolio companies that successfully navigate the water sector's complex landscape? Multiple stakeholders with conflicting interests, plus heavy public sector involvement that tends to move more slowly. For sure. I think part of like our investment criteria is we're looking at the founders and the people and their experience in the sector, where they're bringing us insights that sometimes we didn't even know. And I think they're able to tap into, oh, this would make a difference for these people or in how they process. But Steve, if you have other ideas, feel free to jump in on
Yeah,
that.
I think some of this relates to go-to-market strategy too, that some areas are just going to be more regulated, more complex with more approvals and time and permitting. And there's going to be other market segments that don't have those realities that are either easier to access. And so this does relate to go-to-market strategy and how a company can successfully commercialize. For example, like we just heard from Kendall in Flotion, the Mungstad is the largest industrial base in Norway. It so happens that Kendall's boss, Alex Fuglesang, the CEO, knows that industrial base. He knows the head of it from childhood. It's just a great first place to go. They're short on water, actually, and we can access that. The company also has a broader, very big pipeline of projects on building out these subsea desal projects to help solve water scarcity, but go where you can get adoption first and where the friction is going to be minimal and where the pain points are really strong so you can get that adoption. And then during that go to market and selling into those beachhead markets, you can work on those longer range things that you need to access those next segments that do have that more complexity over time. So I think it does map to successful go to market strategy.
Yeah. Steve, I'm going to throw another one at you if you're game.
Sure.
I assume the BIV impact categories will continue to evolve to align with the composition and future targets for portfolio companies. And then part two, how do you plan to assess the unrealized performance and resulting impacts for companies / technologies? The majority of these would in some stage of development.
Yes, the impact categories, I think what you laid out, those four towards the end are exits, treatment, like those are going to probably stick. Maybe we'll see slight evolution, Marissa. It's kind of to you and Tom, but I think we're kind of firm on that. There's already been a lot of evolution and thinking about this. It's like right now I mentioned we're in due diligence with a company. We've adjusted our diligence memo. And then these impact categories for her company are, unique because of the space that she's in. And so what are the right metrics for her to be able to track that other investors are going to probably want to see too? And how do those map ultimately into our framework and what we can map and target? So we are going to see this, evolve, but I think those four major categories we have, Marissa, I would think those are probably going to stick. It's just like Marissa said, we don't have a CO2 number like the energy sector has. So it gets really a little bit messy, what's the right metric to track? And then how does that feed into what we have here? And on the second one, I'm not sure if I understand that question, Amit, the unrealized performance and resulting impacts in stage development. Is that a question about, we see the opportunity if these companies scale. And maybe just a point that Tom and Christine and Marissa are really firm on is that we feel that the only way for a company to actually have impact is if they actually get in business and grow and be successful. So there's the alignment with financial returns. And we're, very driven strongly for financial returns. We want to understand what the impact is going to be of these companies ahead of time. But Amit, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I mean, it's always a crystal ball type of question, right? You are at a stage where these companies are in like some stages of development, either they have demonstrated some commercial applicability potential. The question was about that part where you are not, maybe you are clear, but like it's not clear what the potential impact would be of the technology, and how would you assess that at that stage?
Yeah, right. Actually, one of our portfolio companies is dealing with this right now, where we're looking at what is the overall CO2 impact, because they actually have a pretty strong CO2 mitigation impact if they were to scale overall. And actually they're doing life cycle assessments right now. And you kind of map out, at least what we're doing with that company is we're mapping out in the fullness of time, if you could get into all these segments, what could that be? And then the plan will be to track like their realization of that over time, if that helps. And I think we do want to see when we invest, what is the potential of this company, not just, the metrics, but what is the potential of this company in the fullness of time. And so if that's what your point was, that's a really good one for us to make sure that we're investing in companies that we understand what the full impact could be over time.
All right. Thank you.
I'll take this one. How does the team approach tracking value add activities? We actually built our own system through Notion and some AI tools that tracks every introduction we make, every task we do, board meetings, customer introductions, all of that. It pulls all that data together, and then it spits out kind of different pretty graphs that we have one of like activities per company, activities per type. So we know, are we doing not enough introductions or more introductions, et cetera. We also have one by team member, which is really just a measure of who's doing the best job at tracking rather than actual activity. But yeah, Justin, I'm always happy to show you that offline if that would be helpful. Let's take one more just to be like conscious of time. Steve, do you want to take this last one? At Clean Tech Group, we track many water tech companies, and some are commercially proven, but not necessarily pushing the frontier of technological novelty. How does Burnt Island weigh the degree of innovation against near-term impact when evaluating early-stage opportunities?
Yeah, really good. I think Sanina and maybe Connor, your question here too is, we're still a little bit early in this. I think we feel really strong about this impact report. I would just want to say, Marissa, the amount of time that you've put into this really over the last year and a half with the whole BIV team, because this is really hard to get to this point. It's really difficult to get here. And I'd say that, like Sanina, your question, and Connor, your question, your point about making sure that, the impact is aligned with companies and investing with companies that can actually deliver the most impact and impact in areas that are most needed. That, more to come on this. Let's see where we're at next year or the year after when we give the impact report at that time. But I think these comments are really informative for us to think about, our investing and our impact. And, to be clear, we're a financial investor to deliver financial returns. At the same time, we want to deliver strong impact, and we want to see how our investing can really do that. And ultimately, those two should fit together. But totally get the point that you guys are making here. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. A few questions we didn't get to, but always happy to follow up offline. And if you'd like a copy of the impact report itself, feel free to ping me. And thank you for joining today. Bye, everyone.